I'm Paul Ryan, and we're here at Sun Valley, and it's March 23rd, I think. We're here for the Aisha convention, our annual meeting, whatever you call it. International Ski History Association meeting, which my friend Rick runs and does every year. So it's a great event. It's a great event. You see people you haven't seen in a long time. And
I want you to tell me about skiing. When did you start really seriously thinking about being a ski bum after college, or was it before?
Good question. Thinking seriously about a ski bum. I never thought seriously about being a ski bum, because in my New England whatever upbringing, that would be not acceptable. So I had to have something, a cover story. I had to cover something. So I was always going to be a ski racer. Not exactly, of Olympic caliber, but that way I had it was like a, approved purpose rather than a ski bum, which my parents wouldn't have really accepted, I don't think, So even though in some ways that's what I was. But, well, I started skiing, when I was age 5 in my backyard. We lived in Newton, Massachusetts, and we had about half an acre of land, and there was a big hill, 100 feet high. But I'd go out there and go down that little hill, and a couple of places around there, and then earlier and after that rather, junior high school, there was a ski hill in Waltham, Massachusetts, called the Prospect Hill. It was called. And there was, in fact, a prospector ski club that was there, and I used to go over there, and it was a great hill to learn on because it was steep, it was icy, there was a rope tow, and so you had to really work hard at it. And I was somehow, I don't know, I was very interested in racing from the very early days of skiing. I never was drawn to the pleasure skiing or this big. A lot of it, we didn't have that around very much. There was no open powder hills. But so racing was appealing. I guess maybe I was competitive in most things, and that too. So and they had a pretty good racing program there at the Prospector Ski Club. And so we would go over sometimes at night. I'd go after school. My father would drive me over there, and they had lights on the hill, and they'd be setting slalom and practice slalom at night under the lights on the ice. And it was, which was good training. It was good training. And I was fairly successful at it. And we actually raced for the club up in the New England, forget the organization, New England Ski Club. They had the championships up at Cannon Mountain, Went up there and did well there, and a couple of other northern events. So that got me into skiing, and furthered what I was doing in skiing. And but I also played hockey a lot. So 2 things in the winter. And so when it came to high school, Newton High School had a hockey team. So I had to make a choice. I'd either pursue the skiing more or play on the hockey team. And the hockey team was a team organized. There was the skiing was a little bit, didn't have that sort of organization, and so I played hockey for the high school team, and then was good enough, so I was sort of recruited to play for Rensselaer. It was just RPI, which is a college, had a very good hockey team, and in Troy, New York, after that, an engineering school, which I was also interested in, so it seemed ideal. It was an engineering college as well as playing hockey, and most of the hockey team was from Canada. I was one of the 2 or 3 Americans on it, so I was not on the top of the rung playing with the Canadians. They were really good. But RPI was a very good team. They had won the national championship the year before I got there, so the competition was pretty high. But anyway, long story short, but after that, I always had this frustrated feeling of, I really wanted to ski. I wonder how good I could get if I really gave it a shot. I just did nothing but ski for the whole year. So after I graduated from college, I went up. I worked for a while, and then I left and went up to Stowe, and I worked at the Yodeler Lodge and raced in Stowe. which is when Othmar Schneider was there. It was like, he was sort of he'd won the slalom gold medal in 1952, I think. But anyway, so that was very encouraging to keep doing that, and I did, and raced around the New England races, and but January of that year was a disastrous year. It was got warm, it was raining.
Now, before we leave Stowe, we'll come back to the warm rain. What about Marvin? Tell us about it.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, that's good, yeah. Because, in Stowe, which is where Marvin Moriarty was from, his family was there, Kermit Moriarty, and Annabelle was his mother, who made the Moriarty hats, which Marvin pushed. It was very successful. But Marvin was sort of at the time, he was like the local hero, although he was slowly being displaced by Billy Kidd, who was on his way up. Marvin had been on a couple of Olympic teams, or at least a national team, and I think one Olympics he was at, but or FAS maybe. But so Marvin was around, and Marvin would, come over and practice with us, and he would set courses that I couldn't even make it through. I mean, Marvin would fire through them. He'd set them very difficult, and he was great, But he was a good guy. I liked Marvin quite a bit. I had started photographing then. I had brought a camera up there, and Marvin, for some reason, had a camera. He said, Paul, there's a better camera. I have it. There's a better camera. You can have it. So Marvin gave me a camera. I still don't know exactly what was going on, but he gave me a camera, and which I kept with me for the rest. And anyway, that was Marvin. Marvin was I don't know how to describe Marvin other than he was usually sarcastic about everything, but in a pleasant way. He had this raw sense of humor, New England sense of humor. That he was. It was hard to get effusive praise out of Marvin. He'd be, yeah, okay, yeah, good, yeah, that'd be about it. Never wildly enthusiastic. But anyway, that was Marvin. His father, we used to go over Marvin's house, and Kermit, was Marvin's. He actually had the first remote control to the TV. Not that it didn't do anything. All it would be turn off the sound, and we'd be watching TV, and Kermit, Marvin's father, wanted to say something. He'd pick up he called it the blab off. He would go click, and whoever was on TV would stop talking, so he would talk. And then when he got through talking, he'd turn it back on again. And so that was good. And there's another story, actually, I put it in my book, but Kermit took us to a race once, Marvin and myself and a couple of others, and drove us to a race somewhere, and Marvin didn't do that well in the first run. It was a slalom, and Kermit looked over and saw the timers at that time. They were timing with a stopwatch, a little hold it in your hand and go click, like that. And he said, the timers, they're wearing mittens, You can't time a race with mittens on, looking for any excuse for Marvin's bad time, So, but that was Kermit. That was Kermit. He was the epitome of the New England, cynic, I guess you'd say. Anyway, so that was
So okay, describe the weather. Yeah, I think we're going west.
Well, right. Like I said, we were myself and a couple of other friends up there had basically done the same thing. In other words, we had walked away from whatever career we had, other than skiing, and alienated our parents to some degree. And why are you up there doing that when you should be working, But it was a horrible, horrible year. Just like it was cold and rainy, and then it would freeze again, and just the conditions were terrible. And so the three of us said, well, look, let's go somewhere else. And so George Fox, who was my friend, had a friend in Aspen, Doug Rowley. And so he called Doug, and Doug said, "Yeah, come on out. You can stay at our place for a while and stuff." So I got my 1955 Chevrolet, and Tony, my girlfriend, got in her Sunbeam Alpine, and we drove out and drove across the country, to Aspen, and got to Aspen, and at night, in the middle of the night, at Doug's place, and Doug said, "Oh, it's not so good here. Maybe you shouldn't have come." Oh God, But what was not so good at Aspen was like 1,000 times better than Stowe was that year, because it was like, Aspen mediocre is still pretty good. So anyway, that's the getting out west. Anyway, so yeah, we got to Aspen, and Aspen was great. Aspen was really. And I started racing out there in the Rocky Mountain circuit. There were pretty good people out there. It was a good thing. Max Maralt, I think, who was an Aspen guy who was living there, and Dick Dorworth was actually there as well. In the early years. Dick was, of course, like cut above everybody for the most part. He'd set the world speed record. It was still, he was on the World Cup level of racer, and but driving to races was a little bit more extensive there than it was in Vermont. I mean, we'd drive to Utah for races. We'd drive to, other places, long distance to Jackson Hole, and so that was fun. I mean, you got to see the country a lot, a lot more than you would otherwise, than I would have ever,
How long would it take to go from Aspen to Jackson Hole?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know. A long time, 7 hours or so, 6 hours. It was before a lot of freeways too. It was like you had to do roads, back roads and two-lane blacktop kind of thing. But it was fun. It was great. I mean, I used to. I'm a total apple pie freak. I love apple pie. And I knew places along the way where truck stops that had great apple pie, and I would go out of my way a little bit to get to those so I could, just for the apple pie, because it was good. Anyway, so that was that was what was happening then, and then, but in the summer, well, at the end of the season in Aspen, or the skiing season there, the races were winding down there, but the races would move to the late season races would move to California, Mammoth and Sugar Bowl. Silver Belt was the last one, and so we headed out there. We just drove out to California, and I'm trying to think of where we were. Well, yeah, we just drove out to California and stayed in some little motels and things like that on the racing around there. And, oh no, I know. Yeah, we went to Mammoth first, and Dave McCoy, was so great. I mean, we were these sort of ragamuffin racers coming out there, and he at the time the base lodge at Mammoth was just being finished. The upper deck, the upper story was not even complete. He said, "But you guys want to sleep there? You can sleep there." So half a dozen of us crashed in the upper third story of the Mammoth Mountain Lodge. It was and a lot of ski free. Because we were racers. And it was like he was good like that. Dave was great about anything having to do with racing. As he was with. So, yeah, that happened. It's a quote. I'll see if I can think of it. It's if I can present it in the right way. Jim Salter was one of my favorite writers. Who was, before he was a writer, he was an Air Force pilot in the Korean War. He flew F-86s. Was quite good. And after that he decided to just drop out of that. He was very good about letting go of an entire section of his life and doing something else, which he did. He said, "I want to be a writer." So he dropped the whole aviation thing, the old pilot thing, and started to work as a writer. And it was said, he said, Salter felt that, like flying for him, the aviation and the Air Force was the prime of his life. He said, and that was in his 20s mostly. He said, when you're a pilot, you're some sort of an elite, you know, right away. When you go out to be, when you're a writer, you're really nothing until you do something, you know, until you have some success. And I always thought that in some ways that was true of racing and skiing, you know. I've gotten kickback from other people who think that because in racing, when you're a racer, there's something, oh, he's a racer, you know, he's racing. When you quit, you're somebody else on the hill. You know. Good skiers, but not, you don't have the bib and you don't have the whole thing of it. You know. Anyway, that's just like a story about one of my perceptions.
Tell us what Jim did. Didn't he have some role? You know, he lived in Aspen.
Jim Salter?
Yeah, he lived in New York and Aspen.
Oh yeah, well Aspen and New York and maybe California. I don't know. New York and Aspen for sure. Yeah. Well, he's I think one of the great American writers. He wrote A Sport and a Pastime, which is a hugely, you know, everybody loves that book. You know, he wrote very well about his flying. In fact, it's been said he and Saint-Exupéry are probably have the best ability to describe what it's like to fly an airplane, pilot an airplane. And of course, he did write the script for Downhill Racer, which was based on a. Do you remember who wrote the book?
No.
There was a book about downhill racing that I think was the core of the film, but Salter wrote the script with Redford, and he and Redford actually spent about a season going around the European race circuit looking for ideas and situations and people and all that, you know.
Was he there when you met Redford?
Salter, no. Well, he maybe was. I didn't see him. Yeah. I didn't see him. I met Redford, leaping ahead a bit, but like I was doing a film for Bob Lang, for Roger Brown, on ski racing. Lang had just had huge success with their plastic boots on the international competition level. They had probably 3/4 of the races, the international races, not only American, you know, skiing on Lang boots. They were just that much better, everybody thought. And so it was hugely successful. And then he said, hey, well, we should do a film. Film on it, you know. And so he called Roger, and Roger called me and said, look, all our guys, Barry and I are making a bunch of films. I'm like, we got to do a film for Lang. Why don't you go do it, you know? And that's about it, you know. And all Lang wanted, they said, well, we want to show the race circuit. We want to show all the racers and what it's like to be a racer and what it's on a World Cup level, which is what it was. And he said, and show the boots now and then, you know, which was pretty easy to do because everybody had them on. You know, everybody had the boots. And so I went over to Europe. I had packed up, it's crazy. I mean, you know, like 10 cases of cameras and film and everything else, and got on a plane for Paris and flew to Paris and met a guy over there, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, I don't know, I'll think of his name, but he was a French filmmaker, an older guy who lived in Paris, who was going to get me a soundman. So he found a soundman for me, French soundman. So we piled it all in a Volkswagen bus, and headed out on the circuit. Went to Kitzbühel and other places, but in Kitzbühel, Redford was there shooting Downhill Racer, shooting the beginning of Downhill Racer. And as he tells you in a story, but he told me I filmed it because we were doing something else with him. He said, but you know, he said I was there and said one thing he hadn't figured out was how to present the subjectivity of running a downhill. He said, I want to express the feeling of what it's like to be going downhill on a course. And he said he tried rigs doing this and rigs doing that and helmet camera, and nothing really gave the feeling, you know. He said, and then he looked up and he saw this guy this guy with long hair, which is me, skiing down the course, holding a camera in my hand, following a racer, or not a real racer, but someone on the course, skiing the course basically with a point of view, holding a camera. The helmet camera is okay, but the high angle of it doesn't give you the proximity. It feels like some detached view, but I would hold the camera knee level or something like that, so it get a sense of motion much better. Anyway, he thought that was great, When I said, could I do it, which I would have loved to have done, but I was making my own film for Lang, so I couldn't drop that to do that. So, but he got Joe J. Gilbert to do it, who, did it quite well too. So that was also was the beginning of a long friendship with Redford. I've worked with him on several films, on River Runs Through It and Horse Whisperer, and kept up the friendship over the years. It's great. So.
Back to
I don't know where we are,
California.
but okay.
How did you get to Sugar Bowl?
Sugar Bowl was funny. That was interesting. Sugar Bowl was the last race of the year on the circuit. And after races at Mammoth and other places, Sugar Bowl was late. And the Silver Belt there was the race. It's a great race. It's a great course. It's not just it's like a natural canyon where you come up and down and you go up on the side of canyons of the wall and down and on. Giant slalom, I guess you'd call it. And anyway, so on the second year that I was racing, we ended up at Sugar Bowl, and Ed Siegel, who was running it then, who I'd become sort of friends with as well, he said, Paul, what are you going to do next year? I said, I don't know, maybe I'll go back and Aspen and race again. He said, Ryan, you're not going to go anywhere racing. He said, you're okay, but you're not going to go anywhere with racing. Don't do that yet. But you're a pretty good photographer, and we're going to hire a photographer next year, so would you want to do that, be our ski area photographer? Like, no, I don't know about that, but so I did. Anyway, I did that. Next year I went to Sugar Bowl and was their ski area photographer for the year. And so that kind of was a tipping point. That got me into what might be then another career or another way of making a living anyway, So that's what happened with that. And actually he said, well, next year we're going to do a film. And I said, well, I'd be interested in that. But I knew nothing about film. So I said, well, I'll do it. He said, well, make a presentation. So I went to San Francisco then at the end of the season, and I said, well, I'm going to go to film school. I'm going to learn something about film. So I went to San Francisco State in the graduate film program, because one thing, you could do it for about $100 then if you lived in California and state school. So I did. I went there and started studying film and made a presentation to Ed to do the film, but he gave it to Warren Miller instead. And but I kind of stayed on for about a year and a half at film school, and went through all that, kind of got into film, still photography, but So, but at the end, it's very out of sequence here, everything in normal life, but at the end of film, of school, I was going to go out and charge into the film business and do something, And I got this call from John Fry, who was the editor of Ski Magazine, who I had met too in the ski world. And John said, well, we're going to hire next year a staff photographer for the magazine. Would you want to do that? You'd have to come and live in New York. And I said, oh, God, I don't, now I'm just supposed to make films now, He said, well, think about it, and then we went back and forth, and he said, well, you wouldn't have to live in New York all the time, maybe part-time in New York, part-time back in San Francisco. And anyway, we worked out a deal. We said, okay, fine, So John hired me as a ski photographer, a ski magazine photographer, which was that really put me over the edge in that, and it was probably the best job I've ever had. Really, I mean, not long after I started that, Mort Lund, who was a great writer for Ski Magazine, John said, well, go over and we want to do a thing on St. Moritz, and a couple of St. Moritz and Gstaad They went out the other area, I forget, So I'd go over there for 3 weeks, and just take pictures, And Morton was over there writing. So, that kind of stuff, and go to Chile and do a thing on the summer skiing down there, or the other thing, well, John was Canadian, and that was sort of the heyday of Nancy Green's. She was doing really, really well. And so, and John wanted to do a personality thing on Nancy Green. So it was basically, he sent me out to follow Nancy Green around for about, 3 or 4 races, which is, take the time and get to know Nancy and take pictures of her on the hill, off the hill, talk to her, whatever you're doing, which was a great, again, that was the kind of thing that was really, really one of my happier times. Not too many, they don't get that sort of time to do things now. Magazine stories, certainly, they're much.
Or budget.
Pardon?
Or budget.
No, well, that's what drives it. Yeah. Right. Anyway.
So, how did that transition then take place from still photography for Ski Magazine into film?
I'm sorry, say that again.
From still photography into film?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I worked for John for Ski Magazine for 2 years, 2 seasons. Actually, 2 years, because in the summer, he brought me back to New York to do some archiving for them and to go, organize their stuff and come up with some more story ideas. But at the end of that, I don't know, I thought I wanted to, I still had the film bug from having been through film school and liked the idea of film and all that, and so I thought of doing something in film. And so I said, oh, I'm not going to really, I'm going to sort of leave the Ski Magazine job. The following season, I said, all right, I'm not going to do it for the next year, John, which I often regret in some ways, because it was so much easier than trying to make a film, you just take still pictures, and travel around. It's great, Anyway, but that was my choice. I did that, and went back to San Francisco, where I lived at the time, and was shooting little film things here and there, short, mostly documentary stuff. And then in Aspen, but I was out in Aspen, which I still had a lot of connection to in Aspen. I'd go there a lot, and I was out there and I was racing a motorcycle. I just bought this new motorcycle, a Husqvarna, which is really a hot motorcycle. And I managed to put it upside down, and it landed on top of me, and I ended up being in the hospital, in Aspen. And they were trying to figure out what was wrong. And I was in there, and it was kind of sad, but there was kind of this, something was going on. And what happened was Barry Corbett, who was part of Summit, the other half of Summit with Roger Brown, had been filming in a helicopter in the mountains around Aspen, and the helicopter had crashed, and Barry was in it, and he had a severe spinal injury, and they actually brought him into the hospital at the time, and it turned out he had become paralyzed then. But Roger, and Roger now he needed some people, because Roger had just done Ski the Outer Limits, which was hugely successful, a wonderful film. But that got him a million other films. He got him half a dozen other films to do. But now half of his team was gone. Barry was gone as a camera person. He was a great editor still. But so he had the Lang film to do. So he called me up and said, you want to go do the Lang film? Just you, all right. So that was the first transition, I went off and did that.
Now, was Bob Fulton with him then?
But with Roger?
Yeah.
Yeah, he and I both kind of came on at the same time. Well, when I was in Stowe, the first day I was up there, and Othmar Schneider was sort of the local ski god. He was he ran the ski school at the time, but was always serious and involved in all the races. But anyway, I was working at the Yodeler, Bob Kirby's place, at the end of, almost in the village, and it was about 5 miles up to the mountain. So, and I didn't have a car, and so I would hitchhike up. So I got off work at the Yodeler and my skis and went out and hitchhiked up, and this old, 1950 Chevrolet comes barreling around the corner. I'm hitching. He screeches to a stop, and I go out there, put the skis on top and came and jumped in, and he said, he said I had like the racing skis there. I was, and so and it turned out it was Othmar Schneider, which took me a while to recognize. Othmar was driving in his car, and so but he says, you are a racer? I says, yeah. Jawohl, that's good. and so, but he drove me up there, and he was driving like he was racing. It was a cool thing to do, I thought, and then of course he got there and he pulls into his private spot right next to the lift. So it was nice. It was good. Yeah, it all worked, and then I actually ended up buying a pair of my first downhill skis from him. Those 210 Kesslers. So, yeah. But that was Othmar. He was like, he was there in his '52 Chevrolet or whatever it was. Yeah.
Was there a real Austrian influence at Stowe in the ski school?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. Because it was Othmar Sepperouche. Was he there? Yeah. No, I think it was definitely most skiing was Austrian then, until the French came along.
Now, jumping back to starting to work for Roger Brown, and Bob Fulton came in. You guys changed editing a lot. Did the use of soundtrack, cutting to sound, have anything to do with that, or?
For me, yeah. When I started making films, Ski Racer, which is the film that I made, the first film for Roger, which was the Lang film, which was really just a look at the World Cup circuit, but particularly from the point of getting to know the racers as well, to really talking to the racers. And I was very interested. I'd come up through cinema verite influence, which was a big thing then, and I'd been to film school, so I really wanted to do something more than the average ski film, which was more action-oriented. So I wanted to talk to the racers and understand and get their literal sound on camera. And so that was my approach. I mean, I spent a long time just filming the racers on camera. Spider Savage, remember a great line of his. He was, like I think I've said, that Spider, had this imagery of not imagery, but like he projected that he was very casual about everything. He didn't really take it all that seriously, which I'm sure he did, of course, but he purveyed that, and like I asked him about, I said, Spider, what do you think about when you're going through the gates, And he said, I don't think about much anything. I just want to go as fast as I can from gate to gate, and that's it. I want to get down the hill as fast as I can. That's it? Yeah, that's all I think about, I don't think about the style and, just going from gate to gate, which was probably not true, but, as opposed to Billy Kidd, who I did a long interview too with, and Billy went into this detailed description of a course. He said, my memory's pretty good, and when I look at a course, I can remember every gate, and not only the gates, whether it's a flush or an open gate, a red and a blue, but I can see whether it's a fall away on this turn, or whether it's a counterbrag, and I can remember like 120 gates just like that, which is how he thought about it. He said he knew exactly what to do because he knew that he had it in his mind what that was like, So, but that I like that use of sound, and with Karl Schranz, I thought was a real great use of that because nobody really knew much about Schranz, other than he was like the sort of like the bad boy of skiing, and nobody knew him too much about him as a person, but he had. I asked him once. I said, Carl, when were you born? He said, I don't know. I have to ask my mother, which he obviously did. But he was. I got to like Schranz. Not many people did, but I did. I thought he was pretty open. I think he wanted to show what his life was like. But that's one aspect of the sound, which is like the cinema verite approach to sync sound, you know. But also, I was making these films in cutting them in San Francisco, and I was pretty involved in the whole San Francisco scene in the '60s, and knew most of the rock and roll bands that were there. You know, Grateful Dead and Steve Miller. Yeah. So, and I wanted to use that kind of music in the film. And I thought it would have the energy, it would make it very contemporary, have an appeal to audiences. So I managed to actually get permission from 5 of those bands to use their music. I think I paid $500 to one guy. That was it, you know. I had Grateful Dead, you know, Steve Miller, you know. And
Weren't you down at the Monterey Folk Festival? Pop Festival? Did you go to
Pop
Monterey?
Festival, yeah. I was there. Yeah, I did. That was a whole other thing. Yeah. But I thought the idea would be to use these soundtracks, the whole song, you know, or most of a song, as a mood setting for these sequences in the film, you know, because like I said, it was about racing, but it wasn't a depiction of any given race. It was no like a race and a winner and a loser, you know, it was just the feeling what it was like. I broke it up into slalom and downhill, and there was no giant slalom then, and free skiing. In fact, the bigger picture was like, what is the difference between free skiing and competition? In fact, Dement Giovinoli, who was wonderful in the film, the Swiss skier, you know, he racer, but I asked him, he said, you know, he said, if I can get it, it's in the film. He said, skiing is really, I could do it in a Swiss accent, but he said, yes, skiing is really free skiing. He said, it's like, at the end of the year, I come home and I ski free, you know, it's like, and I'm floating through the powder and this kind of thing. It's not racing. Racing is something different, much different. And then at that point, I cut to the racing scene, you know. But that was pretty much, that was one of the themes of the film. I'm talking about like film theory, what I was thinking about was to make the free skiing, you know, is one thing. It's a different psychology than when you're racing, when it's just kind of almost like Spider said, just you go from fastest way from pole to pole and then down the hill, you know. And but then like I go back to the rock and roll music, I thought that there were sequences in it. I didn't want it to be like a dry analytical film, so I had these sequences that I had like the best of all the stuff I had filmed in America and in Europe. I had about 6 races, and would cut these very short, fast cut sequences, you know, and build up and build up and build up, you know, and it became sort of like a contemporary, what has evolved as contemporary commercial cutting, where it's very quick, cut like that, and that worked out pretty well, I thought, in the film, you know. I don't know what else, how deep you get into the filmmaking part, but that was.
What in that era? At some point, didn't you move to Aspen, or you had a film company in Aspen, right?
Well, right, but don't forget, I had been, when I left Vermont in the early years, you know, the first movement out west was to Aspen. And I spent most of the season there before coming to the Mammoth. And I went back to Aspen the next season, just to give another shot at racing, you know, and made a lot of friends there. I mean, Joey Cabell became a pretty good friend, who started the Chart House, then took that on to like enormous things. And, you know, Don McKinnon was there, who became sort of like the pseudo mayor of Aspen over the years. Yeah, I knew a lot of people there, Norm Clayson. So I would always come back there, you know, after that. And Norman Don and I started a film company there after a while. You know, I was still in San Francisco, but the film company was based in Aspen, and we did like 3 films for John Dimitri, going to the Bugaboos, the Caraboos, and the Monoshis for helicopter skiing, which was wonderful. And then we did a film on Spider Savage for Dimitri also. It was on one of the first years of the pro skiing, you know, and it's really great. I mean, we filmed at Spider around the pro race at Vale and maybe Aspen, I forget. There are about 3 pro races we filmed, and you know, talked to Spider a lot too. I mean, we asked him what it was like, you know. So that was, yeah, Aspen has been, well, it still is almost like a second home, you know, which is nice, you know.
So, where did the idea, you've done this ski racer movie, where did the
Yeah.
idea come for Carly? Did you just spin that out of Ski Racer, or was that?
No, somehow, you know, that's a good question, and I don't really, that came to me from apparently, you know, I forget whoever had Kneissel and Henke Boots, or Henke then, I think, was it, maybe, Carl was not on Langs, thought we should do a film on Costerance. It was a conglomerate, like Skiing Magazine got involved. They wanted to do the film, be part of the sponsors of it, and an airline, I think, Swiss Air. So it was one of those things that where you get about 5 people deciding they wanted to support this film, make this film. But the idea of it was interesting. I probably wouldn't have thought of it myself, to be honest with you. I think someone had the idea, whether it was Roger or, you know, but it came to be, and so they said, well, Paul Ryan should do it because he knows that world, and you know, knows the racing world, you know. And so we did that. Yeah, that was the same format. We went to follow Charance through follow like I think 3 races in Europe, and then we came over to the Canadian race, and then ended up in Vale, perhaps. I'm not exactly remember sure, but you know. No, sorry, Heavenly Valley. Right, it was Heavenly Valley where he won the World Cup. I mean, what his results of the race at Heavenly Valley clinched the World Cup for him. It was the last race of the year, and he didn't win it, but he did it better than whoever else. Patrick Drusella, somebody who was like second, so he was, and he said, I won again, yeah. He won it twice in a row in the World Cup. But that was one of those things where we did that. We filmed him racing and stuff. But also I went back there in the summertime to St. Anton to film his home and to get a feeling of the environment in which he grew up. You know, so he was there because went out and played soccer with the local guys. And I talked to Dixie Knoll's father, Fritz Knoll, who was Dixie Knoll was a Stowe guy. Do you remember him? Yeah, he was one of the instructors, but he was from St. Anton. So he set it up. He said, "Go see my father, who ran one of the lodge there, who was really great." His father was a wonderful guy. Talking about Carly, he said, "Yeah, Carly, you know." And but now he's over 30 now. That's important. But he still goes on, and he's good for us. But no, that was nice. And I filmed Carly's mother, his own, you know. But that was the kind of thing that I was interested in, is getting into that aspect of ski racing, and who the people are, where they come from, and what. He has some great dialogue in that. He's, you know, I can't, yeah, but he even says, you know, he said, you know, yeah, you have to make that choice early, you know. You either go to school or you race. You know, he said, I made that choice. He said, maybe I was wrong. I don't know if he really felt that, but that's what he said. You know, that's what he said. But then he said, but then for me it's been great. You know, he said, you know, I was invited to the Aga Khan's wedding. You know, and I have people all over. They know me. You know, so, but you know, it was sort of what it was about for him. You know, but the scenes in the town. You know, we had like those religious ceremonies and little kids playing, you know, so we kind of try to get across a feeling of what it was like for him growing up there, you know, and all that, and maybe wanting to go beyond the little town of St. Anton, maybe, I don't know, yeah. So it was good, it was good. It was,
I showed that movie to Dixie, and he just, boy, did he
Oh, he
love it
did?
when he saw
Oh,
his
really?
father. Well,
Yeah.
Dixie was my ski school director when I taught skiing. uh,
Oh, really?
for 10 years.
Oh, yeah,
worked
yeah,
with Dixie
yeah.
as assistant.
Dixie was great. He was really
Yeah.
one of the most popular instructors there. Yeah.
That's great.
Did he end up running the school there? You said director?
He actually was the ski school director at Gore, and
Hmm.
then at Mad River,
Hmm.
and then he went on to be the
Oh, I
mountain
didn't-
manager of Burke
Really?
for like
Really?
a dozen years or more.
So this was much after his time at Stowe.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's great. Dixie, yeah. The red-headed Austrian.
Well, I guess for you skiing, really, you moved to flying. Were you flying? Were you still flying? Were you flying with the Aspen? I mean, you and Bob Fulton were both pilots, right?
We were, yeah, yeah. Chronologically, well, I got my pilot's license in 1972, so that would have been, no, that would have been after the ski filmmaking, most of it anyway, you know. So, well, it sort of was that the one bled into the other, yeah, yeah. And flying was just something I was always interested in, aviation and flying. I thought even I'd join the Air Force, but my eyes weren't good enough to be a pilot, so I didn't do that. But it was really something I wanted to do, and that's one of the, you know, when I was working basically freelance photography and filmmaking, one of the things you can do is you can take a chunk of time and say one job ends, and before the next job begins, I'm going to really totally focus on the flying, which is what I did. It was like I did a crash course in getting a pilot's license in about a month, you know, and did so, and then Doug Tompkins was actually the guy who was like got me back into it, because he had got his license and bought a plane, a Cessna 180, and I said, yeah, he did. Why don't I do it? Doug was a good friend. We lived near each other in North Beach. Doug Tompkins, who started the North Face and Esprit, which was another, yeah. But so I actually went to the same place where he learned to fly, the flight school in Oakland, and went through it and did that, and then actually I ended up renting Doug's plane. He had a plane, and he'd got two planes then, but he said, well, you want to rent the other one, you can rent it, you know. So I did, you know, I rented his 180, and it's another one of those things. Well, I'd like to fly in the weekend, fly around the city a little bit, you know. But it exploded beyond that and ended up doing a lot of flying, you know, flying to the Yukon and to the East Coast and Mexico and all that. But, you know, it became a big thing, you know. So that was.
Did that combine with? Did you fly in to go skiing, or?
Well, yeah, I did in some way, occasionally. Although that's not something you want. If you have to be there, you don't probably want to fly your own plane, especially in the winter, because weather can be a problem. Yeah, so, you know, you can not be able to get to the airport you want to get to. So, but it wasn't a major part of my skiing. It was just a separate activity, you know. Although I certainly did fly to Mammoth and flew to Aspen a lot, you know, too. Yeah, yeah. It was great. Flying was a wonderful thing. I advise anybody to do it, you know.
You flew in here, right?
I flew in here, yeah, to the, what was it, the little airport?
Haley.
Haley, yeah, I think Friedman Airport, I think it was called. Yeah, yeah, in Haley, yeah, yeah. And what else? I guess, yeah, that was a big.
You made a movie for Hell's Angels. Not that we need that, but it's a great story.
Yeah, that was a funny thing too. Yeah, I was, again, I was in San Francisco at that mid-'60s time when there was a lot going on culturally, you know. The Hells Angels, the San Francisco Hells Angels, very important. It was different than the Oakland Hells Angels. The Oakland Hells Angels are the group that Hunter Thompson got involved with and got the shit beaten out of him, you know, because they're not such a good group. They're a little bit more, violent, I would say, you know. But the Hells Angels in San Francisco were really trying to somehow blend with the hippie culture or the hip culture, whatever you'd call it then, you know, and Ken Kesey was trying to befriend them, and they'd come down to his place in La Honda, and it was a different. They had a place, they had a house in the Haight-Ashbury, the Hells Angels, their home, where I went for Thanksgiving dinner. But so that was and a guy who was one of their friends, not an angel, but a guy that they knew, who knew me, said, Paul, the Angels want to do a film. They want to do a film because they think that the films, the Angel films, the biker films anyway, that are being done by Hollywood are giving the wrong impression of who we are. We want to tell our own story. So we want to make a film. And would you be interested in it? The format would be that each angel would get his 15 minutes. He could do whatever he wants to do, but that portrayal of himself. And there's 20 angels or something. So I said, that's fine. Okay. He said, you won't get any. We can't pay you, but we'll pay for the film and we'll pay for all the cost of making it. Like, all right, that sounds good. It sounded interesting. So I did. I started off on it. We filmed each person. Either so some guys just want to ride their bikes. Other people would want to sit there and talk about their ideas of life. We went on a run with them up to their land. They had some land, and so I had a triumph. So I had a little bit of more respect from them because I was a bike rider too. Not a Harley, but that still. So on that, I actually tied myself onto I was on one of their Harleys, and with Bill Fritsch, who was sort of the main force behind the film. But I was facing backwards on the bike. He was facing that way, driving the bike. I was tied to him with just one rope, and I had my little handheld camera, and the angels the pack of them were kind of riding past me. I was sitting there filming, and total trust in this guy who was driving the Harley, But, we all did things like that in our early life. No helmets. Nobody had helmets, They were, anyway, it was an interesting project. Unfortunately, it never came to fruition because they ran out of money and they just said, well, we can't do this anymore. And they said, we want the film back. So they took the film back. God knows. I have actually a copy of, I might do something with it at some point. Just some of the interviews. The interviews are kind of interesting just because it sort of, their opinions about things are pretty interesting, It's some of them are pretty absolutely, unabashed about their, sense of violence, a sense of racism, a sense of everything else, but sense of men-woman relationships, It would be an interesting thing to put together on that level, It would be. I'll send it to you, Rick. You can edit it.
It sounds great. You've had a lot of done a lot with your photography now. So you've had a lot of exhibits, haven't you? Some of those pictures.
Some. Well, I did. Yeah, some. Yeah, I've had the San Francisco Museum of Art, SF MoMA, San Francisco Modern Art Museum. Bought a bunch of my pictures on the Lawrence Halpern Sea Ranch. It's called Experiments in Ecology, early that they for their permanent collection. So that's good. I've had other shows, lots of pictures in magazines, lots of a couple of shows in New York. Yeah, it's good. It's gratifying. Come in and watch your pictures on the wall. It's always interesting. I guess it's like editing a film. You think you have all these pictures. Oh, they're great. And then you say, well, let's do a show. Okay, so you got to pick these pictures out then. You got to pick out whichever it is, how many, put them up on the wall, and then one day you walk in and look at those on the wall. Holy shit, they're not so good. Why is that one there? 'Cause, what I mean? The objectivity of looking at something in the display situation, for me anyway, it's always like a little bit, it's great in a way, but it's also like the reality of how good it actually is, when it's on display. It's a different story, Well, it's like having the first screening of a film, like, here's the film. Nobody laughs at that joke, how come? It's too late. On Carly, the film about Carl Schranz, at the end of a race, I think it was maybe, I don't know which one, maybe St. Anton, but Carl had done well, and Franz Kneissl was there because he had his Austrians racing on Kneissl skis, you know. So he brought everybody over to the hotel where a lot of them were staying, you know, and Bleiner wasn't there, you know. He didn't show up for a while. He was late. And all the others he had them lined up. Just, you know, a corny group picture of him with Franz Kneissl. He's a huge guy, you know, like, and then he said, "Where's Bleiner? Where's Bleiner?" "Oh, there's Bleiner." And Bleiner comes in and he had a yellow Porsche. He comes screeching up in his yellow Porsche. "Ah, Bleiner in the Porsche." "Yeah, okay, come over." So they all get in a row, and then and Kneissl, Franz Kneissl, you know, he says, "Okay, now everybody like this," you know. He kind of throws his hands up like some Napoleonic, you know. And so he was just over the top promo man, you know, Franz Kneissl, you know. And he was, you know, he didn't mince words. He was great. I mean, yeah. Yeah. But I'm trying to think of the other Austrians, but well, I don't know who they were. You would know.
Yeah.
But they were all there. I mean, they were all, you know. But Schranz was sort of the king of the, like at the, what was it, at the FIS, when they were there, they were filming we were filming the opening ceremonies, when, you know, each team goes in carries a flag, you know, and Bleiner is there with holding on the flag, you know, like waving a flag, getting ready to go, and then Schranz looks, you know, "No, I take this." Just walked out like that, you know. There's no doubt as who was going to be the flag carrier, yeah. So.
Did you know Egon Zimmerman?
No, that was afterwards. I was sort of away from the world by then, out from the skiing world by then. I probably met him because when he came over here, but I didn't know him then. No.
Okay.
No. My involvement in skiing was sort of very. My involvement in skiing has been pretty much off and on. I was very, very involved for many years, and then, you know, dipped into other things, and then came back into skiing again, and other things. So I wasn't as singularly as involved as I might have been even, but I don't know. It was different, yeah, different story. We've done a lot of work with George Soros's company, not involved in skiing. Although it was unfortunate because Soros was, you know, of course, a major figure in world influence politics and one of the wealthiest men in the world, you know. But he was a skier for a while when he was young. He's 90 now. He's up in his 90s, you know. But he skied in Hungary and the Alps, and his brother was on the Hungarian national team. George apparently was a pretty good skier, and I always wanted to. I thought when we were filming him, it'd be wonderful to get him skiing, you know. But it was too late. He'd given that up at that point in his life, you know. Just played tennis, you know. But he was an interesting guy, Soros.
So
No, that was one of the first places I went. For a ski race. It was in Kitzbühel. In fact, I went there and I forget what the race was, but it was
Hanukkah?
the Hanukkah every year, the annual Hanukkah, and I just was there with, you know, one camera and a sound man, and it was it, and I sort of probably transgressed a lot of the procedures because I didn't, not out of conniving, but just out of naivete. I don't have to need permission. What do you mean permission? I just went up the hill and went out and filmed, you know, and I thought afterwards, you know, gee, I have no permission, no permits for this, nothing, you know. But I did that, you know, and nobody seemed to care. That's the other thing, you know, it was kind of a different era, that mainly, I think. Nobody really, you couldn't do that now. You couldn't do that now. But in terms of that also, Downhill Racer achieved one of the most brilliant production deals ever. Their deal was that they got to film 3 or 4 of the World Cup races, and they got to use all the racers as such, you know, not as they didn't film Karl Schranz as Karl Schranz. They filmed Karl Schranz as Max Meyer, who was the character in the film, and I forget who played Max Meyer, not Redford. And they filmed, you know, Billy Kid and Spider Savage as the Redford character, you know. On they had two French guys filming all on the course, filming the race guys. And then at the end, of course, they would come down to the finish line. They would stop, and then they would bring Redford out, and Redford would do just finish the race dialogue, you know, or the character whoever played Max Meyer, Schranz, you know. But it was definitely modeled after Schranz, you know, the sort of Austrian, yeah, go, you know, guy, you know. And that was in Kitzbühel. That was where they first did that. That's where I was there. And in fact, I'm in the film because I was out there filming with my camera, whoever was finishing, you know. And so they had the wide shot in the finish area, you know. And I was in it because I was out there, you know, running out like the press guy at the bottom. And people, it's amazing. People saw the film and they said, "Oh, Paul, we saw you in that." How they recognized me from holding an eclair and out there, you know, but they did, yeah. But anyway, that was yeah, brilliant. I mean, you couldn't get that kind of permission, I don't think, anymore. You know, the crowds, the races, the racers themselves. I don't know how they did that with the racers themselves. It must have been with the, you know, who would it be? What was the association? Who would say you have the rights to film Billy Kid and Spider Savage and
In
use
our
that?
race.
What?
In the race.
In the race?
Might have been the FIS.
Yeah.
Might have been the FIS.
Oh, really? Not whoever's, not the American, or the amateur, whatever. What's the organization?
United States.
Yeah, USSA. Yeah. No.
I don't think so.
That's tricky, yeah.
Probably,
Yeah.
you know, the governing body of the race. to put on the
That would
race.
be it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. But I didn't bother either with any of that stuff. Yeah. And in fact, the next year when I went back there, when I was filming the Schranz film, they kind of, again, I was still naive about it. They sat down and said, well, they were kind of pushing for, well, you know, what will you pay us to film this thing? I kind of dumbed-assed my way through it, you know. Oh, I don't know, we don't, you know. And they didn't, they could have kicked me off, you know, but they didn't, you know, whatever. And, except for the when it came to the FIS that year, 72 would it have been? Yeah, at Val Gardena, that was totally tied up with NBC, I think, or somebody had the rights to the film, the races. So I had to really be tricky about that, filming that. But a lot of what I did was I filmed, because I knew the NBC guys, they were all pretty friendly, and so I was in the control room where they had like 6 monitors of their cameras, and I filmed the race as seen on the monitors, not literally, but not close up. But I'm filming a scene in the monitor, as you know, in the room, and with the, I forget who the guy was, you know, talking about it. You know, well, I want to know what's happening here. Tell me what's happening here. You know, so it was a sort of a backstage version of the race. And then I did have a shot of Schranz coming across when he won. You know. Yeah, and they won, but still with the NBC narrator going on. So that's it. Schranz wins. He's got the gold, kind of thing. Yeah, it was good. Oh, Rip was on that too. Rip McManus was at that time working for NBC, and you know, he was the commentator, the savvy commentator. You know, and then we went with Rip down to do an interview with Schranz. You know, and yeah. That was another one. Let's see, we're sitting in the back of the car. Rip and Carl are in the back of the car. I was in the front filming them, driving to the interview situation. And Rip said, he was kind of asking Schranz. He said, and so so you won the Hahnenkamm, and yeah, I won the Hahnenkamm 9 times or something like. I forget the number, but he just said it very casually, I won the Hahnenkamm 9 times. Yeah.
Just reminds me, when you were skiing and filming, reminds me of John Jay.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know John Jay?
I know of him. Yeah, yeah. I don't never know him
Want to
personally.
say something about him? Maybe how you maybe I don't know if you got inspired or whatever.
John
I don't
Jay?
know.
Did you ever see a John Jay film?
I don't. You know what? I don't think I did. I don't think I did. I saw it when I was at the Prospector Ski Club in my early days when I was junior high school. Warren Miller was kind of the new. He just came out. They said. I remember our meeting. They said, well, we got this new guy from California named Warren Miller. He's going to come out and show our. They had a film every year. So Warren came out, and that was my first experience of watching a ski film, Warren Miller type. But I don't think I knew of John Jay, but I didn't see him. Why did you bring up John Jay?
Well, because
Okay.
there's extensive footage of the 10th Mountain Division and stuff from John Jay. He was,
Oh yeah, right.
and Warren actually credits John Jay with motivating him.
Yeah,
Or
well,
making
of course.
skis.
He was like the father of and the Austrian guy. Oh, the Austrian. I don't know. He's German, wasn't he? Who made
Arnold Funk.
Arnold Funk? Yeah, I did a film. Not a film. I did a paper on him in film school because he was my motivation. Arnold Funk. Device. What is it? Device to hell. Device or something.
The White Roush.
The white. Huh?
The White Ecstasy.
The White Ecstasy. Yeah, yeah. And Lenny Riefenstahl was actually in that too, believe it or not, those films. No, yeah, Arnold Funk was the other. Well, that was in film school. He was the guy that inspired me about being esoteric, and then there was the Maisels brothers who were inspiring me about doing cinema verite. Like get the people, get the truth of the people out of it. And all the French Godard. The film is truth at 24 frames per second, I think. Yeah. But no, I'd like to say something about it. I have no. I never saw a film. I just heard of. He was a legend. John Jay was a legend. And yes, he was probably the father of a lot of the ski filmmakers. Yeah.
It was that travelogue thing. He did the travelogue thing that Warren picked up on.
Yeah, yeah. Did John Jay have Warren's sense of humor?
He had a dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. Here's a little bit of brag thing here. When I worked at Sugar Bowl, okay, that one year, there is at the end of one of the trails, it came down at the lip and then fell off, and everybody would go down and they would jump off that hill and they would off that little lip and go down. And so I said, a guy named Don Brolin was the Sugar Bowl PR guy there, and I said, Don, why don't we have a contest at the end of the year? We'll call it the kangaroo jump, and we'll have, any people can enter, and we'll put the 2 flags on the pole, and people go off that, and they'll get, whoever goes the farthest wins, And so I thought it was a great idea, And Don got Warren to come there and film it. So it became a big deal in one of Warren's films, these, people going, because inevitably, when you have that kind of a thing, especially it's in the spring and people have probably already had a couple of beers, major crashes, people just exploding, getting in the air upside down, not on purpose, and crashing, But that was I take credit for the kangaroo jump idea in the beginning, So I got a lot of pictures out of it too. So.